Good morning, beautiful people. Welcome back to the gardens here at tamTERRA. This morning I wanted to share with you our June salad garden progress. In previous seasons, I have done garden tours of our whole gardening space all in one video, which can be really lengthy. So this season I've decided to do something a little different and split our gardens up. Today we're going to be covering the raised garden beds that are closest to the main house. This is what we refer to as the salad garden. For those of you who are new here, hi, hey, hello. My name is Melanie and I live at 2,200 feet in the mountains with my mother. Our homestead is called tamTERRA, which is why this playlist is called tamTERRA Grows. We have roughly 120 frost-free days in our growing season and live in the beautiful North Okanagan region of British Columbia, Canada. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you can be notified when I share with you our in-ground garden bed area later on this week. That will include our high tunnel as well as our no-dig area. Without further ado, and while this coffee is still doing its job, let's take a look at the June garden. These garden beds that are dug into our hillside are actually the beds I've been doing the most amending on this season. I'll link to the video in the cards so you can take a look at that, but they've been doing really well and I'm happy to report that the compost amendments have seemed to give us a bit of a nutrient update and which has allowed these beds to actually grow crops, which is the goal. And I know that sounds silly, but these have been my notoriously underperforming garden beds, so I'm excited that they're doing as well as they are. In the front on this first garden bed, we have provider bush beans. There are roughly somewhere around 20 plants, and they're at different phases, as I did have a few started in the greenhouse and brought them out here to replace any of the direct sown beans that didn't germinate. They are doing great. Like I said, they are a bush bean variety, so there's no trellising or anything set up. Down the road, if they get tall and start flopping over, I might implement some tomato cages, but we'll see how it goes. We also have herbs in this garden bed. This lovely tall tarragon plant here in the corner right here is doing quite well this season, as well as our thyme that's down here in the front. There are a few just ornamental cosmo plants and some oregano, which I shared with you harvesting already once this season, and it is growing back fairly quickly. Behind the bush beans, I do have 6 okra plants, and about 4 or 5 of them, 4 of them are doing really well, and unfortunately 2 or 3 are not looking so hot. We have had quite a wet beginning of June compared to a very hot May, and I think that this has thrown the okra off. I have never successfully grown okra, but because our season is so warm here, I still have faith. This is one of the challenges with growing anything in the mountains, is you go from cold to hot to cold real quick, and you gotta make hay while the sun is shining. I'm still holding out hope that the okra will pull through. Quite a few of them are still looking very happy, but a few look like they maybe got too much water for a small root system. That, or they didn't get anywhere near enough water, and I find it very funny that it takes me a minute to be able to tell the difference between an unhappy plant being dehydrated or overhydrated. This top garden bed has a lot of different things going on. We have our 5 blueberry bushes, which I just did an update on as well. There are a few cosmos that I transplanted into this bed, so they are looking a little droopy. They've not quite taken root yet. We've got a few marigolds. There are some ground cherries. I direct sowed a variety of beets as well as turnips, and there's also a few volunteer squash. What I'm most excited to be growing in this garden bed this year are peanuts. I have never grown peanuts, and earlier on in this season I really believed that the chipmunks that I have been at war with got to all of my peanut starts and ate them all, but it turns out that I managed to have about 6 or 7 that made it through, and they're up here in this garden bed. They've not gotten very large. Again, I think it's because we've had a very warm May. and then a very cool June. But peanuts were primarily planted here this season for potential fodder for the chickens. Do I know if we're actually going to get peanuts harvested? No, but I wanted to give it a go. It's my first season growing them, and I know that the plants themselves are very good to feed to your chickens. As we have meat birds right now, I wanted to see what I could do with peanuts. The garden bed behind me has black mesh over top to help deter my mom's cat Smudge, as well as the chipmunks that seem to reside in the trees right behind the salad garden. This bed has so many little volunteer pansies or violets from last season. I get the two confused all the time. I'm pretty sure they're pansies. Trombosino squash, as well as carrots, 2 different types of beets, and kohlrabi. There is a few firsts in this garden bed for me this season. I have never grown kohlrabi. It's up here in the front. I would get you all closer to take a look, but we're meshed up and I don't want to undo it. So the kohlrabi is in the front, then there's a row of carrots, beets, another row of carrots, a few beautiful volunteer pansies, and then the trombosino squash in the back, which I'm never sure if I'm saying correctly, but I'm really excited to grow him this year. The kohlrabi and the trombosinos are totally new to me. In this smaller garden bed that we have tucked behind our doghouse, there are 2 different types of mint. We've got peppermint, as well as spearmint, 2 nasturtium flowers, and then a Benjamin button flower as well. I'm excited to see this fill out and hopefully be a happy little place for some pollinators. There is also our massive comfrey plant, and I wanted to see what would happen if I planted sweet peas out by this wire that's connected to our telephone pole, and they're actually doing quite well. At some point I will train them up this and hopefully they'll be quite pretty. I always find the funniest thing about filming these garden tours is never knowing if I'm in frame. In this first garden bed area, we've done something a little different, and we've actually stagger planted a bunch of different summer squash as well as tomatoes. I have determinate glacier tomatoes in here, some tomatillos, and then on this little fence here I do have some indeterminate cherry tomato varieties. I think in this garden bed I have Gardener's Delight and Eigelhart. Gardener's Delight is just a lovely, very typical red cherry tomato, and then the Eigelhart is a yellow tomato. These 4 tomato cages are housing the determinate glacier variety. You can see here that we have 1 summer squash plant and another of the same variety across from it. Skip a few spots, then we've got our classic just black zucchini here and its partner across the bed there. Into the tomatillo area, which they're starting to flower. I did decide to prune the tomatillos quite heavily this year, as I didn't do that last year and they just took over an entire area. So I did take off some of the little branches at the bottom, and will probably continue to do so as the season progresses. I took a chance and actually let this volunteer summer squash stay here because this is the area last season that I planted out the green tint patty pan variety. The leaves are starting to look a little different. Obviously the volunteer is way further along, but we'll see how they do. This is a green tint patty pan, like I said, and I just am hoping that this is some edible summer squash, but I don't know. For me, that is partially the fun of volunteers, is you just gotta take a chance. I can tell that it's a summer squash. I know it's going to be a summer squash, but what type? It's a mystery, which is just like garden surprises. Next garden bed is this middle garden bed that has this massive trellis in it. There's a lot going on in this garden bed, so we're gonna do it by little sections. In this front section, we have Swiss chard as well as some dino kale, a few volunteer cosmos, as well as some chamomile growing. Oh, and down in this corner, I think there's some calendula as well. So definitely loaded with the flowers and some Swiss chard and kale for some leafy greens. The back section of this garden bed, as you can see, remains a tad bit more shady, especially when this trellis fills out with the beans in the later summer months. So I do have just a blend of lettuce planted here, as well as spinach. Now, I direct sowed this lettuce and this spinach, but like I said, May was very hot and then the temperature dropped in June. So our spinach has actually gone to seed already, which is kind of interesting. Normally our Mays are quite cold, but it turns out that the beginning of June was a lot cooler than our May, so unfortunately I didn't get a spinach harvest in this area, but I did direct sow more spinach in a shady part of the high tunnel. I'll show you it later on this week. We also have this very sad looking summer squash plant. I start all of my plants from seed, and I actually purchased this one at a market. This is a lemon sun patty pan. I have patty pans, both white and dark green ones, but I don't have any yellow, which is why I purchased this plant. It was on sale, and my intention is to save seeds from it. I think it'll start having a better time soon. The new growth is looking healthy and green, but this older growth does actually have powdery mildew on it. The only squash I have ever had to get powdery mildew are from starts that I've purchased at stores. Never once have I gotten it on a squash that I've started here myself, so that's an interesting takeaway. In the front area of this same garden bed, we have 2 ground cherries, some nasturtiums, a bunch of volunteer calendula, cosmos, as well as chamomile. So it's definitely a bit more aesthetic with some flowers and some good plants for the pollinators, and ground cherries, of course. It was important to plant plants that I would be able to step in and amongst and through to be able to reach the pole beans when they're harvestable and producing on the trellis that's right in the center of this garden bed. Would it be considered a design flaw that I have to be able to step in the garden bed to harvest off of the trellis? I don't think so, because we've actually put a couple of large rocks in the garden bed, so I'm not messing up the soil or compacting it too badly, and I know that it's a consideration, so I plan for it. That's why there are things like the ground cherries and nasturtium in the front of this bed. That's the rock there that I'll step on to be able to reach better into the deeper parts of this trellis to harvest the beans. And this is the last little triangle area of this garden bed. There's actually a volunteer tomatillo, again a bunch of cosmos and chamomile, just some beautiful bright orange pansies that have just been the focal point of this garden in the early spring because it's the only thing that's flowering thus far. There are a few random spare garlic and some parsley that actually overwintered. Now, what we have growing on the trellis itself in this garden bed would be 2 different types of pole beans. One is Blue Lake and the other is Kentucky Blue. Kentucky Blue is a hybrid, which is actually hybridized Blue Lake and another pole bean variety, which I'm forgetting the name of. Probably something to do with Kentucky. And then the other is just Blue Lake itself. And it is interesting how much quicker the Kentucky Blue, so the hybrid, is growing. Hopefully you guys can see this, but this is the Kentucky Blue, and it has grown to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It is 6 squares, almost 7 squares high on this trellis already, which is at least to my chest area. Obviously not every plant is that high. Some of them have only made it 2 or 3 squares, but it has been growing quite well. Now if you come back to this side of the trellis, you can see that the Blue Lake, they're at max hitting about 2 squares. They are healthy and they are growing, but it's just a bit of a delay in time, which maybe will in the long run be a good thing, so that I'll be harvesting more of one side of this trellis than the other for the first bit. Who knows? We'll see. It's the small differences like this that make me enjoy doing A/B tests so much and trying different varieties, because when you only have 120 frost-free days, every day counts. So if those Kentucky blue pole beans are growing sooner and faster, they will be producing sooner and faster, and I can harvest them sooner and faster. So we'll see how they do, and I'll keep you updated on a bit of a side-by-side comparison between the Blue Lake and the Kentucky Blue. While we are back on this side of the garden bed, I should show you that I have a bunch of peppers in pots on this side. There are a few varieties this year. The first two here, I believe, or sorry, the first four here actually are Anaheim, and then we've got two Cayenne, and then the end three here are pepperoncinis. Pepperoncinis, again, a variety I can never pronounce. In this back corner shady spot, I just have a container that is growing some sugar snap peas. They look to be rather happy over here, so that's good. Now on to the last garden bed in the salad garden area. In the front here, we have alternating plantings of turnips, salad turnips that stay a little smaller, red top, rather soft. Very excited for those. And arugula. Arugula has been growing like mad and has actually just started to sprout, which is fine. Make good use of that while we have it and get some salads going, probably today. And then again, more turnips, arugula, turnips, and arugula. I know it's getting a bit hard to see me because there's a lot of direct light, and I'm hoping that you can still see all the plants that I'm sharing with you between the harsh shadows and the bright sunshine that's coming in hot. Oh my goodness. But I do want to point out that the arugula that is planted at the back of this garden bed, right here, is nowhere near as close to flowering. Actually, the arugula in the front of the bed is flowering, and the stuff in the middle bed is in the middle, which is applicable. But again, I just find it so interesting that when you plant the same plant in different areas of your garden, you'll significantly extend how long you can harvest that plant. I talk a lot about different varieties, and just like with the beans, A/B testing, and this is why. Learning different areas of your garden, what varieties work best, it's kind of what keeps me interested in gardening. It keeps it fresh and new, and I can always be learning and improving. So that is why I would strongly encourage you to plant different types of the same crop, different varieties, hybrids, heirlooms, etc., as well as spreading out the varieties you're planting. So don't plant an entire bed of just potatoes or just beans or just peas, but alternate, mix them up, put them in different spaces, and that way you can do a bit of a comparison of what area in your garden grows what crops best. This also gives you a tad bit more insurance against things like pests or natural disasters. For example, certain garden beds might get washed out more easily than others. Obviously, raised garden beds have a different type of drainage than in-ground garden beds, and with high tunnels and no dig. So variety is the spice of life, and it is no different in gardening. In the back of this smaller bed, we do have three different types of cucumber. We've got the Suyo long cucumber, two plants growing here at the back on this trellis. In the center here, we have the lemon cucumber. There's three of them that are growing here, and they seem to be doing quite well. And up here in the front, there is the Market More cucumber. Definitely gets the most sun and seems to be the happiest at the moment, or at least the biggest. All right, my friends, that is it for the tour of the salad garden here at tamTERRA. As I mentioned at the beginning of our garden tour today, I will be releasing another tour that will show you our no-dig garden beds, our in-ground garden beds, as well as our high tunnel space. If you're interested in watching that, remember to hit the subscribe button and turn on your post notifications so you'll be notified when I post it this week. As always, may the force be with you. I'll see you all back here very shortly for another video. Bye-bye for now.